Hello, we are Adventuresome Reviews.
And today, we are reviewing Children of the Dead City, which explains why my hair is a lovely shade of vermilion.
Yeah, you're looking a bit jokerish, I might say.
Yeah, don't worry. I'm going to wake you up in the middle of the night.
That was an evil laugh, not an insane laugh.
I'm not insane on Mondays.
Joker is insane. Joker laughs crazy. Joker does not laugh evil. Now, on to the review. Or, not the review. Okay, yes, on to the review, but also on to the synopsis. Yeah, we don't have an adoring audience, so we have to supply one ourselves. It's a very low budget production in this place. King Shar of the Kingdom of Shining Waters was not a particularly brave man. When he heard that the mad sorcerer was creeping up on the mountainside, he fled the fortress city, practically handing it over to the mad sorcerer, and made his abode in Dalabeth, the king's city. The palace lay behind high walls on the side of the Great Lake, and Dalabeth lay almost defenseless on the other. Even behind the high walls of his palace, the king worried. Most of all, he was afraid for his young daughter, the Lady Shilla. It was the palace blacksmith that offered the king salvation from his fears. Why not adopt an orphan boy from the city, he asked. He will grow up with the Lady Shilla and learn to love her as a sister, and he will protect her when the matters of the kingdom take you away. So the king sent 3 trusted men to bring him a suitable boy from the city orphanage. But it was more than 3 men that knocked on little Dargoth's door the next day. His mother tried to protect him, but she was no match for the unit of trained soldiers that took her little boy Dargoth from her, claiming that he was wanted to fight in the war. As Dargoth and his mother struggled to reunite, the mad sorcerer's relentless attacks throw the kingdom into chaos and despair, and they find themselves up against forces and intrigues far beyond what they could have imagined. Immerse yourself in this epic story now. You go and lead us in this time. Don't give me that. Go, shoot, begin.
So, I have several thoughts concerning the book. The first part is that the first half of the story is a little bit weak.
I'm not gonna say it's not weak so much as long, in my opinion.
Long and rudderless. Like, stuff happens and the story progresses, but nothing really happens.
Very little happens in a long stretch of periods. It's like things do happen, they're just not
meaningful.
And they're kind of small events that they are important to the story, like with Dargoth's capture, right? That's kind of what kicks off much of the story, and that's an important event, and that spawns other events and so there are important moments, there's just a lot of dead space between these moments.
But after that is when the story starts to prove itself value. After the children kind of grow up and they start embarking more on the story, and there's still a lot of treading water going around. There's
that, yes, there is, but it's dramatically less in the second half of the book. That's where the characters start becoming players in their own lives. They start taking control and they move events.
And it's not just and the events that they move and affect changes the story in a notable way.
And there are slightly more interesting events, and we probably move past the first half a little bit too quickly, because what happens in the first half of the book is where Dargoth, the main character, gets kidnapped, goes to a castle, and then later escapes the castle.
Yes.
And then he then spends his younger years training to become a fighter and training and starting the rebellious movement against the sorcerers. So you have a lot of setup in the first half of the book.
And that's a lot of reason why the first part of the book feels rudderless or whatever, because a lot of it of him fighting the sorcerer is just him fighting this random battle here or this random battle there or defending this random city,
and there's nothing really to differentiate one battle from the next. It's always a group of 4 sorcerers and 8 demons or whatever the number is, and it's just the setting changes. Sometimes the fight happens by a river, sometimes it's an ambush in the forest, occasionally it's defending this village.
Yeah, but the battles never change
at
anything.
All. It's mostly it's showing you building up Dargoth's reputation, but not in it's once again the battles don't change.
Yeah.
There is a little bit where you get to know the characters because it's a fairly extended cast, and the long first half allows you to get at home with the characters, so it's not this massive 1,800 characters.
And I think that would be fine, except the characters aren't particularly the large portion of them aren't particularly complicated.
The characters' personalities are not
generic, but
they're not great. They're simple, and which is at once marginally beneficial, but also detrimental, because they're not the secondary characters. They're not clogging up the story with too much backstory or complicated personalities and whatnot. But at the same time, if it's done well, good personalities are always better than bland.
Yeah.
But that said, the main characters, you have Lady Sheila and Dargoth. They have strong personalities, and
they have real character arcs as well. Dargoth in particular has a really strong element later on in the story that I really liked.
I really think we should get into knee-deep into spoiler territory, because those are the points that just really sell the book here. But that's for 5 minutes in the future. Lady Sheila also has a really nice character where she actually starts the story out at 4 years old, and she's
hyper naive, helpless, somewhat annoying to Dargoth, who has just been captured, thinks his mother's dead, and now is imprisoned with the people he thinks captured him.
And so you have this character has this massive chip on his shoulder, and he's supposed to deal with this annoying child who has this high-pitched voice, is constantly pestering him for attention and questions. In itself, that's actually a nice start off to the relationship, as he slowly actually kind of grows into the brother relationship.
Yeah, and on her part, she's automatically attached to Dargoth, but her arc is her growing up and losing the naivete, and then learning how to be learning that she is powerless, that she's in danger, and then making the decision to reclaim her life, to become dangerous, to reclaim power, to try and do the events her father cannot because of any number of reasons.
And one of the really nice things about the relationship is that her father is weak. He does not teach her anything. He does not prepare her for the world. She is pretty much the epitome of a noble princess who is... It's okay, not necessarily the negative aspects of she's sad in luxury. She's that honestly not those negative aspects of like where you just hate her. She's just all the negative of protected, defenseless, and naive, like we already said. So her father does nothing to protect her, and you see him one of the really good parts of the book is that you see how he, despite having good intentions, is just low-key incompetent, and he is damaging everything around him, from the growth of his daughter to the kingdom. He even bungled Dargoth a little bit. The king is not a bad man. And so this leads to a nice thing where it's like, Dargoth teaches Sheila just by being Dargoth, and his incredibly competent, it's like he doesn't start out competent, like he's not god tier competent, but his desire to be competent, it's how he takes power and he grows powerful, and his beliefs on life this is part of Sheila's. She learns from him in a nice way, and just by being the brother that actually is kind of done with her and is irritated by her and her attachment to him. It teaches her more than her father ever did, and it's like you have the kind of spy in the castle who's highly placed. And she learns to hate that guy purely because Dargoth hates him. So Dargoth was a massive influence on her life, and it's a really enjoyable aspect of the relationship. That's done subtly, actually.
I wouldn't necessarily say an immensely enjoyable.
I enjoyed it, so it's like,
It is enjoyable. We just gotta cut out the adjective.
adjectives are fun!
Chop, 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 chop. We are cooking. You're not advertising.
Fine. Immensely! Yeah! Okay, I'm done.
Now for the spoilerish, the interesting
No,
part.
no, time out. Let's deal with the writing a little bit.
I found it a little weak. The writing.
The writing was weak, and so this is probably the second main detraction from the book. It's not necessarily straight up bad. Okay, so it is bad, but it's not bad as in terrible. It feels bad as in immature. There's a lot of just immaturity. It's like, this could have done, there's better ways to frame this. This is kind of a
very straightforward, but without the vocabulary to strengthen that style. It relied heavily on telling and the passive phrasing and basic words, which is not a good combination for writing.
Yeah, so a lot of the benefits from having short, straight to the point is the sentences have impact. They're strong. They use powerful words.
They build momentum.
This writing style does not use strong words.
And he did not use brief sentences. He used... A lot of the times he overexpressed something. Or just... Not even sort of like delayed on it. It's just... It took too long to convey his point. And the point wasn't conveyed with impact, but more by a generalization.
That being said, the actual narrative of the story does show a lot of promise for the writer. And as we're going to get into the spoilers, you'll see why.
Can I finally talk about it?
I'm the one who wanted to talk about spoilers.
I reject that opinion. Very well, you may speak of these
No,
spoilers.
you can speak.
I am aggressively against them, but I will allow this on this one occasion because I am magnanimous.
And because it's decent spoilers to spoil. The spoilers are like half the reason we're gonna advocate reading this book. So it's kind of hard to sell the book without the spoilers.
Okay. You may wait for the spoiler warning nonsense.
You want to wait first? Okay. So the second half of the book really kicks off, and it's because the author deals with some moments that just narratively do fantastic. And so it typically happens, the first really strong moment happens just when the story's starting to get old. And it's, we're dealing with this again. And what happens is that the main character is rapidly reaching divine status in the world. He is the only one fighting against these wizards, and he is, well, maybe not the only one, but he's the most prominent figure. He's a figure of heroic legend, and he's this human going against gods, and he's competent, he's saving people. He's building this massive legend, and you have this sudden swell of hope in the world as people saying, this might actually be possible.
He's building a fortress, and he's gathering followers. He is
actually he is doing so much to change the reality of this world. There's hunger everywhere, so he goes, I'm gonna go buy a farm and solve this problem myself. He's a really go-getter.
He dreams big, and he makes impossible dreams come true, and people adore him for it. And then his palace comes under attack. Treachery befalls, and he dies.
And it's not as small. It's not this small kind of, he's alive death. No, they bury the sucker.
Only, and here's the real spoiler, he's not actually dead. He is just impossibly crippled, and this is what's so cool about it. He goes from being so powerful, so influential, so in command of his life, so able to fight, to being powerless.
A cripple. It's like, and this is a massive weight on his mind because he goes from being hero to being somebody who's terrified of showing his face because, I mean,
He's an absolute burden now.
he can do nothing for himself. And so it's if he walked out, it's like you see. So obviously he goes into hiding, and it's like it's for one reason. It's like, oh, I understand, right? He's the face of a rebellion. If he dies, or not, if he dies, he's a martyr, right? If he comes back as a cripple, it's the thought and character that people look into or looked. Sorry, I should say looked up to is that
matters. But there's even more to it because while he's crippled, he learns that he has magic, and this isn't a sort of this story hasn't been constructed along the lines of, oh, there are good and there's bad sorcerers. No, it's every sorcerer the characters and the reader has met has been antagonistic,
evil. That's the entire force of darkness in the book.
And then he learns he has magic, and he's crippled, and it's so good.
So he almost becomes a devil. It's like, so he obviously he can't tell people it's bad because also that's instant ostracation. It's like the death of everything. It's just grand. So it's like, but then you also have this also serves as a fantastic character development for the character where he learns to be useful and he realizes you see him slowly dragging himself back from this pit of despair. And so it takes a already powerful character and gives him with the worst adversity he could have encountered. Powerlessness. And so at the end of it, he's even stronger.
There's one caveat to that is that he doesn't remain crippled and he doesn't really use the magic ever. He remains hampered, but the story slightly bandages his crippleness so it doesn't become as defining as it should be.
At the same time, so yes, that kind of, I'm not bothered by that because he's the main protagonist and he is an action hero, and he is a general. So never throughout the book he was never displayed as a tactician. Yes, he had some tactical prowess, but he was never this genius so he did not have that leg to fall back on. And at the same time, he never really used the magic. But I would have actually liked the story slightly less if he became the chosen one, the good magic user, the man who would fight off the Sorcerer King in a battle of magic. That to some extent would have fallen into the generic. What happens instead is he rejects magic and he swears never to use it again, which is a moral choice in the story.
I just think him healing and not being crippled kind of diminishes the narrative arc a little bit.
Yeah,
but still good. It's just I would have liked to see how he adapted to being crippled.
Kind of hard to be a fighter without legs, though. He did adapt a little, and it could have continued like that. So, yes, yeah, the crippling does harm it ever so slightly, but it's not a massive. It's a very, very, very small detriment to the story, and it's not even a detriment to the story. It's more of a. It doesn't.
I'm depressed and mortally injured.
And this is still spoiler territory that we forgot to keep waving around.
I've been waving my foot this entire time. You just haven't seen it.
Yeah, it's entirely our fault.
It's doing backflips over there by the door.
Yeah. So
look, it's doing a handstand now. Ooh,
yeah. It's training for the Olympics. It's going to be world famous.
Yeah, you're just going to see one foot running down the vault for the gymnastics.
So, probably my favorite or narrative aspect is Dargoth earns this title because he's the only one who challenges these wizards and sorcerers, and this title is Dagor the Daring, right? And it's fairly easily to explain why, yada yada yada. But at the same time, because rebellions are so write in fantasy novels and yada yada yada, it's a little hard to get behind the title. It's he's Dagger the Daring, right? Until the climax of the story, wherein he just does something incredibly ballsy, and it's like, oh, you're bloody insane. So what he does is he takes five friends and says, "Come on, gang, we're gonna go invade Mordor." He's a cripple invading Mordor with 5 allies. Okay, you're insane, and it's not a suicide mission, throw the ring into Mordor. No, it's we're gonna demolish this place. And on that, we're gonna stage this massive freeing of slaves and rescue these population of people that are being turned into demonic devils. So he's gonna be the saving figure who's saving slaves, healing the demented, and with 5 people invading the Fortress of Darkness as a cripple. Okay, he completely earned the title of Dagor the Daring.
Yeah.
And so,
I have 2 other small complaints to levy this book. Maybe a third if I feel like it. One of them is that the magic simultaneously felt extremely one-dimensional and entirely impotent. The sorcerers are supposed to be devastating and all-powerful and able to wipe out cities, and whenever Dagor's fighting them, he gets zapped. Like, oh, I got hit in my arm with a little scorch mark. I'm like, you're sorcerers! Where's the
muster a fireball! Don't just kind of do hot air or...
Where's the freezing spells and the lightning? Not just, oh, get hit by this little stream of heat. Oh, you're in danger now. But that's the other thing, that's the only thing they do. That little stream of heat is like, oh, you're dying now. Huge repertoire spells. Millions, not millions obviously, but thousands of sorcerers, and the only spell we really get to see Dagor interact with is a little zap of fire that he doesn't even interact. He just hits him every now and then.
It's kind of scalding water at worst. It's like, it's not even explained away that it's like Dagor has magic resistance or anything.
Or he dodges or whatever, but that's the thing, like, we never get to see the sorcerers or wizards really using those spells, so we don't get to see Dagor fighting with the sorcerers or those spells. It's just Dagor killing sorcerers in case he get hit by a stream of hot water.
And it's like, the sorcerers were built up to have different spells a little bit, because you have different designations of sorcerers. Like one has red hair, one has green hair, black, blue, forget all of the colors, but so there was opportunity to kind of expand the spell repertoire in an interesting way. It's like, for sorcerers, purple hair, give him telekinetic powers. That's not complicated to explain, especially if you're,
and 95% you're familiar with the concept. Because, like, but it wouldn't even be a fault of, like, non-imagination, because the imagination that would come from how Dagor, who has no magic, fights against people who does have magic, and it shows him outsmarting or cheating or whatever them, and it does not happen. And again, the sorcerers are supposed to be devastating and all-powerful, but they're never shown to be. It's never validated, never proven.
As a result, the sorcerers become terrible villains.
Boring.
The villains of the story are literally the king and his chief advisor, which is the traitor inside the palace. And
you forgot to wave like a madman to...
Oh, please! The moment the sorcerer, the chief advisor itself, he's the traitor. It's obvious. It couldn't be more obvious if he wore a sign that said, "I'm the traitor," or if he had, a spiked crown and a cackle, an accidental cackle every time he spoke. Or he had this tendency to go. It could have been more blatantly obvious.
But they haven't read the story yet, so they don't know that yet.
I suppose. Well, we're gonna get into it anyway when we discussed Lady Sheila's.
I don't think we need to discuss her anymore. We say she has a great character arc. We don't need to go into the minor details. We don't need to spoil the entire story for them. My young Padawan.
So sorcerers, weak, unimpressive. King Shar, better villain, and he was a good guy. Or
I'm trying to remember what my other point was. I know what my third maybe point was.
oh, I know one point you brought up, or you wanted to bring up, was how you would kind of break off in the middle of stuff.
Oh yeah, that was it. Really annoying habit. Something really exciting is going on. The story's building momentum. Huzzah! There's going to be Lady Sheila's moving against the traitor in these tactical and political ways, and zoom, we go off to the left field. Middle of the scene. Something that's nowhere happening. To build up for what's going to happen in the future, like, no, go back over there. That's interesting. This is really annoying because the first part was so slow to build up stuff. So now it's starting to actually happen, and we're cutting away from it in the middle of scenes, but not even like for full scenes. We're cutting away for like 2.5 pages, and then coming back just long enough. You diverge just long enough to lose the momentum before you return to it.
And it doesn't even necessarily happen for interesting stuff. It's part of his writing style where it's like he'll get halfway through a scene, or even halfway through a scene, or even or just a quarter, and he'll break off and deal with another scene for a quarter of it. And this happens throughout the story, and he's just flipping back and forth between like 3 scenes at a time, making a little progress on this scene, going back to finish a little bit more of this scene, and
it just prevents it from building any momentum. The third sort of minor qualm, which is more objective than anything, is that while I liked the second half of the story better, it did feel like there were some ancillary narratives tossed in. Like, there was a lot of characters, all the characters were doing stuff. It's just, I forget his name, but his one friend that thinks he's dead and thinks he killed him or whatever, and then going off to find dragons, and it's 10, 12 chapters of, you gotta wonder what it's really...
a couple side characters step forward into main character roles, and without kind of deserving or the story really needing them to.
Yeah, and they go on diverging paths for stuff that sort of combines to the main story, but just don't.
It's like you have this one of the ancillary characters riding in to save the day, except the day never really felt too dramatically in danger when they arrive. It was not an incredibly impactful arrival.
But I think that some of it comes from the fact of how poorly handled the sorcerers were. They didn't feel like they needed help, and etc., etc. So it's just going off to try and find help or whatever doesn't work.
Mm-hmm. It's like
especially since they didn't go off to find help, he kind of locked into it.
Mm-hmm. It's like the character just wandered off and kind of stumbled into somebody who brought him over here. Who eventually, it was just a wandering story arc that ended up with him finding dragons.
Here there be dragons.
Yeah. My next qualm is kind of just dealing with the sorcerers again. Is that the Sorcerer King was built up a little, and it's like, oh, we might actually get a decent.
And it gets all of like 5 seconds.
It's not even a good 5 seconds, because it's built up because as Dargoth is in the Castle of Darkness, and all the sorcerers are literally terrified that the Sorcerer King is like, oh, this guy actually has some mojo for once. The 5 seconds he has on screen is him running away.
It's exacerbated by the fact that he doesn't do anything throughout the entire story. Like, he's always dealt with as the distant reason all this is happening. He never has real impact in the story. But as opposed to, like, in Lord of the Rings, where Sauron, he's distant, but you can feel him affecting the world through his minions with the Nazgul or the Ring. Even though it's other people acting, it's all behind Sauron because you can. And it's like it's obvious that he's directing them. In the Sorcerer, for the Sorcerer King in Children of the City, it's not obvious that he's directing or that he's commanding anything. They don't have any direct goals. The sorcerers are just there, hanging around most of the time.
It's pretty much basically what he said is, oh, go conquer that kingdom for me, and then he went off to eat grapes or something. He's almost not an active player in the story. He started events, that's it. So, admittedly, it's not a massive detriment. It's just, that was kind of built up a little bit, and it was marginally disappointed.
Underwhelming.
Counterpoint is like the main villain of the spy. That is,
he's handled fairly well,
quite competently.
You just like him. He's dangerous. He feels in control.
So yeah, so the main villains aren't very good. The secondary villains are really pretty decent. Anything else?
No. I am depressed.
Why are you depressed? You got green hair. You're like a Christmas tree.
How appropriate.
Meh. Meh. You should be happy.
Fine, I'll be happy.
I like it.
Okay. Toodaloo. Like, comment, subscribe. Share this erstwhile attempt with your most villainous fellows.
Or don't.
Spread our will to the masses. Conquer the world.
Or don't. We don't really.
You have no choice. You have been hypnotized this whole time.
Okay, well, I guess that doesn't mean I need to do very much here. Fare thee well, our future friends.